Hello and welcome to today's webinar where we look at how Vaultex engage their employees with off-the-shelf learning. My name is Bogdan Tiganov. I'm the head of content community at Cypher. Joining me today are Paul Hannon, L&D manager from Vaultex, Chris Mickelson, L&D operations manager from Vaultex, and Toby Gilchrist, customer experience manager from Digits. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody.
Good morning, everyone. Morning, everyone.
And Toby, if you'd like to say just a few words about Digits.
Absolutely, yes. If I'm just jumping on to the next slide, got a bit of a summary about Digits and what we do. So we've been going for 27 years now, very much sort of market leaders in that digital learning space where we develop bespoke e-learning content at Digits. And we also have our learning management system, our platform, SoCo Enterprise, which Vaultex are using actively today. And we're very much focused on automotive, finance, retail sectors, working with all these companies that work across all countries, delivering lots of fantastic and interesting things with these clients. But yeah, our motto really is, there's lots of complicated stuff going on with our platform. It's a very advanced system, but we just love to keep things really brilliantly simple and just make it a great user experience, which hopefully we'll see in action today.
Thanks, Toby. And next slide, please, Chris. Just going to go over the agenda for today. So first off, we're going to look at why Vaultex chose to change its approach to learning, then their process for deciding on the right learning modules to use, how they communicated and got buy-in from the rest of the organization, the importance of an engaging LMS solution to deliver that content, and an overview of their blended approach to L&D. And finally, the benefits of this new approach. And just to let you know, this webinar is being recorded, and if you're watching live, the recording will be emailed to you tomorrow. That's the 24th of June. Also, as a reminder, you can ask questions during the webinar. There should be like a panel where you can enter those questions, and we'll address them in the Q&A session at the end. And just to kick off today's webinar, we're going to kick it off with a quick poll. So next slide, please, Chris. And I'm just going to launch that poll now. And it's, how do you currently engage learners? Just going to close the poll and share the results. Paul, Chris, it seems emails is a very popular way of engaging learners. Is that something that you've come across a lot?
Yeah, I think it forms part of our strategy that we've utilised as well. But it's interesting to see that internal comms strategy, how that differs between email, because as we'll go through the presentation, certainly you'll see that we use various different parts of this methodology in different ways to try and engage the learners. We think one form on its own doesn't add as much value as doing this on multiple levels. But yeah, no, it is interesting to see emails tends to be the primary source of that method of engaging learners here.
Yeah, I can't see the results of the poll here because I'm sharing, but if emails is the top one there, it's definitely something that we use, as Paul's saying, in combination with other ways. And when we've done internal polls ourselves, a lot of people very much like the face-to-face kind of communications and briefs, etc. So yeah, it's interesting that that's come up today with emails.
Cheers, guys. I'm just going to hide the results now. And it's over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Bogdan. So we thought we'd just kick off by giving a little bit of an overview and introduction to who Vaultex are. Somebody probably may have handled or touched cash that we've processed, but sometimes it's one of them unknown quantities unless you're familiar with the industry. As Vaultex, we are the UK's leading cash management company, and we handle approximately 40% of the cash volume in the UK. Vaultex as an entity was formed in 2007 as a result of a joint venture between HSBC and Barclays. Some people may have known them previously as Loomis Cash Management in 2007 for a short period of time, and prior to that, Securitas Cash Management. Prior to that again, Securitas, Barclays and HSBC had their own operations for managing their individual cash arrangements with their customers. What we do in essence is help to keep cash in circulation by receiving the monies from our customers or the bank's customers. In essence, we check that money through, and through that happens through the various processes we have, and we take out any old, damaged or forged notes out of circulation along with coin, and we repackage that and send it back out. So in essence, it's more of a recycling plant, and we recycle that money out, but then heavily regulated by the Bank of England and the Royal Mint. We take that responsibility seriously, so everybody who has cash in their pockets or coins know that it's of good quality and it's real. Anything that does come out of circulation is normally returned to the Bank of England or Royal Mint for being destroyed or recycled. Understand a bit more about our culture. Vaultex as an organisation has a very strong focus on employee engagement. We're always looking for ways to engage our employees, and that can be through multiple things, such as internal reward schemes, activities both inside and out of work where we can, and more importantly, those development opportunities that exist, because that's such an important thing to people when looking for a role or a company, to make sure that those development opportunities are there to learn and grow. We're also a diverse workforce, and as a business, we're committed to creating an environment that is equally driven, or in terms of equality. It's very much part of our company strategy and something we're really proud of in terms of what we do in terms of that space, and as well as our Investors and People Awards and so on that we have, and recognition of different things in the equality and diversity arena. So one of the things we did, we identified the need for change in terms of what we did. What we identified was that some of our training that we did internally needed refreshing. Whilst we found that we had a good product to offer, we wanted to refresh that, and it was a conversation that started at a much more senior level with myself and Chris around how we create a blended approach to learning, where delegates could find sessions much more focused on the practical learning when they arrived in the classroom. Now, this journey did start pre-COVID and pre the pandemic, so obviously we were looking at what we did have was we had our approach, and we did have an element of blended learning, but what we wanted to do is make it more engaging, as I say, and then opportunity to practice those new skills in the classroom, and to see how we could do that in terms of combining some of the pre-work that was on offer. So onto our new approach. So we already had, you can start to see the stepping stones on the screen here. We already had our training brochure, internal training brochure, which basically give us an example of what our classroom offering was and our learning opportunities were within the company, and that was very much a case of built on who that course is aimed at, or that training initiative is aimed at, what would be the benefits, objectives, or the usual stuff that you would expect. But what we decided to do in terms of our new approach was look at what content we could basically look that was available on the market that could complement that. And this is where we looked at, we've referred to it as Thrive, we've referred to it as our growth modules, as we'll come onto it, but we looked at the Thrive module and offerings that they had. And we've stipulated e-learning there, but really this approach was around off-the-shelf library, included a lot of mini learning modules. It wasn't just e-learning. It consisted of videos, PDFs, so some of them very short and snappy, but succinct and very well delivered. So the idea was that delegates could look at the training brochure, decide what they wanted to do. Before the delegates attend, they'd be directed towards an e-learning or equivalent of. We wanted to also ensure that our internal policy and procedures, which is represented on that third image, is taken into consideration, because a lot of the content, off-the-shelf content, is quite generic. We want to ensure that our internal processes and procedures and policies were also factored into this pre-learning, and all that would be done before you come on board or come to the classroom. And then that obviously fourth image represents the classroom, and what it did, it allowed us to really focus on practical based session, and for people to practice the skills they'd learned via the e-learning and the review of the policies, procedures, and and this practical based term took on a much more role play, scenario based or discussion based, and we found people learned more about it because they already had some of the theory and some of those policy and procedures. And then the final element of this was very, much a company conformance based and compliance based, which we'll come on to a little bit more in a sec. But Vault is basically just our LMS. So Vault stands for Vaultex Online Learning. It's just the name that we gave our LMS when we introduced it into the organization. And this is where we use that as a go-to for record management, capturing that. And one of the things that we incorporate as part of the validation approach is we take feedback that's all loaded into our LMS Vault, and we also do some validation, theory-based assessments to validate the knowledge that has been gained, so we can hand on heart know that when somebody has received all this training that they have, we can validate that learning has been at least understood as part of that process. So although we thought this through, we sort of still needed to discuss it, and because we wanted to make sure we got it right. And what we wanted was a library that complemented our internal offerings, as I said, our managerial skills in the first instance, but gave us a much more wider range of other subjects that could be digested without attending a classroom session. And what we wanted to do is look for something that everybody in the business could benefit from, and they could use it as they chose to, and as opposed to being directed to this because of a particular training event or training course you have to do because it's role specific. We wanted something that would highlight and give people the opportunity, regardless of grade or job role responsibilities, that people could tap into. We're also very keen to ensure that we separated this from our compliance training. And you can see, we want to ensure that because we do and we accept there's a lot of compliance training that we do, we wanted this to be separated and almost have this as a choice that you go to learn and develop, rather than just something that you're forced to go through or go to because it's compliance based. As I said, we had lots of compliance training, and it was important that we actually didn't want to separate that and not confuse that the training that was completed for that versus the developmental purposes. And when we looked at the Thrive library, Thrive gave us this and more. There was over 130 titles to choose from, and there's a wide range of subjects that complemented what we were doing in our Vaultex training brochure. But it also gave us other content that we could develop with our new classroom approach off the back of this. And in addition, we felt employees would benefit from other areas that were linked to our strategy and engagement, or strategy around engagement and diversity and inclusion. So some of those things that we would normally offer to everybody through various other things, these were there available for people to just choose when they did it at a time that suited them and at their own pace. I'm now going to hand over to Chris to talk about how we started to pull together the brand and the brochure.
Thank you, Paul. So yeah, as Paul mentioned before, we came up with a good internal name for the material. So we decided on Grace. We felt it summed up nicely what people could do with the content, and also some snappy graphics and a bit of a strap line to attract people's interest. So for example, you can see there on the front of the module brochure, help yourself to learn and grow. So yeah, we felt that linked nicely to how the content would be offered to our employees. So people, as Paul mentioned, could go on at their leisure, complete the modules. But we also felt it got employees thinking about taking responsibility for their own learning, and they indeed could help themselves here. They didn't have to wait for somebody else to come along and deliver this training. It was there for them to access when and whenever they wanted to. So the brochure itself, this was based on the information that we received from Thrive. We were able to create this brochure so we could communicate and market to our employees the content. And the aim of that was really to start to generate interest from employees about the types of courses that we had on offer, without having to browse all the way through our LMS. So it was all in this one place. They could access it, flick through, and have a good look about what was on offer. As you can see, we separated this into different areas. So there were 16 different areas we sectioned it into to help target or help employees target their learning, and included that here on this contents page. It was important to do a bit of a welcome page to the whole growth content. So we described what it was all about, gave high-level details of the subjects covered, as well as the type of content that people are going to find with Vault Growth. So video, e-learning, other reference material in the shape of PDFs, and also explain how people could access the content, and how some of that content would now link to our internal classroom-based courses, as Paul explained a moment ago. And then finally, we pointed them towards an FAQ document that we'd created to assist people with any initial questions that they might have around Vault Growth. I'll come back to that FAQ document in just a moment. So the modules themselves, so there was a page for each section of modules, brief outline of what was covered in the module. And again, the aim of that was to help employees target which courses they felt would benefit them. So they could then go and complete them on the LMS, so they could just have a read through, figure out if they felt this would benefit them, and then go and look for that in the system. Within the explanation there, so yeah, you're going to get an outline of each module, but also the duration of each, and they did vary from course to course, so that helps, of course, with people's planning. The FAQ, as I mentioned a moment ago, we'd developed this module brochure to use as part of our comms strategy, but we felt we needed an FAQ as well, to answer some really specific questions that employees might have about Vault Growth. So for example, when the content would be available, so when is it going to be launched, when can I access? Also, who can access the content? Was it something that was going to be available to everybody across the business, or was it just certain parts of the business? And of course, it was everybody. How and where to access the content? So this only accessible inside our internal network, or could it be accessed across the internet from home, for example, which of course it was. Also, the approximate duration of the modules. So I think we put the maximum, and that it was 15 minutes long was the maximum course for the growth content. Also, the release of new content. How was that going to be managed? And we did just mention to keep periodically going on and checking, but we're actually going to release some new content that's been released into the system soon. And again, we'll do a communication at that time to help promote that. And then finally, again, how growth links to our classroom and remote training. So explaining how that process will be carried out and the expectations of delegates for classroom and remote training. So I'm just going to hand back over to Paul, and he's going to explain a bit more detail about how we went about our comms strategy.
Thanks, Chris. So what we got was we'd done some work around the material. We'd started pulling together, as Chris has said there, some of that key content and material that we needed to have to go forward and fit into our communication strategy. So now that we had the main communication material, we felt it was important to communicate this material in the right way to get maximum buy-in from employees and more importantly, the uptake, and ensuring that we got the most benefit out of having these Thrive modules as part of our LMS. To ensure it landed in the right way and reached the widest audience, we went with a four-pronged strategy of comms, which included an email to all our site managers and function heads. Now remember, we already had the senior management buy-in at this point, but we wanted to ensure that our localized operational managers were all aware of what was coming down the line, because that's, we like to communicate in that way rather than it hitting first time and it hitting our intranet in exactly the same way. Now all this from start to finish, which probably took us about a month in terms of, there was additional work required to build the communications material, but from start to finish, we took a lead in time of about a month because we wanted to build that momentum. This could be as quickly as you wanted it to be, but we felt that really benefits us. So the next part of this four-prong approach was to put on our internal intranet. So the managers had sight of what was going out there. We wanted then to engage the workforce on a wider level. We have an internal intranet where we publish what's happening and stuff like that. And we felt 3 weeks before launch was about right to do that, because I think any longer than that, people can sometimes forget about it. Too soon, people are not having the opportunity. And we were very conscious of when we were doing this. We launched this in November last year, and we're in the midst of obviously the pandemic, and we were very aware that some people may not always be in the business because of the restrictions and how we were managing our operational side of the business with the pandemic at the time. We felt that 3 weeks gave people enough insight and opportunity to absorb it. Another part, or the third part of this, was a poster campaign. So we worked closely with our communications team and built some posters with utilising their experience and expertise, and built these posters. So again, going back to the poll earlier on, whilst email is important, we felt using the various different strategies at our disposal, or certain different components as part of a strategy that were at our disposal, was important to us. So these posters were created and distributed around our sites, on notice boards, on whatever space was available and being utilised in that particular operational environment. And then the final part of this was utilising our communication screens. All of our operational sites have communication screens in the operational areas and in the rest areas and restrooms, and we felt that this formed part of that whole strategy. So again, working with our communications team, internal communications team that we have, we created that content to put that on our internal screens. And with all of these, various different communications methods, the focus was really on explaining what was available to people, when it would be available, how people could access the content, and the benefits it could bring to both professional and personal development. And as I say, I'm putting it in your own hands. Okay, I'm now going to hand back to Toby and Chris, who will start to talk to us about how we went about integrating it into our learner management system.
Excellent, thanks, Paul. So yeah, obviously got a very close working relationship with Paul and Chris at Vaultex and the wider team. And we got those conversations going of, how are we going to deliver this on the platform, where currently the platform is very much there's a structured learning plan for you as a user in the platform. It was a very, sort of linear, these are the activities you need to complete, ideally in this order for your specific job role. Where this felt like a completely different offer. It was more of a self-serve approach, almost like dip in, find those activities that work for you and the things that you're trying to work on in your career, and some soft skills that you're interested in. It just felt like it had to be a bit of a different interface, a bit of a different experience for users. So the joy of the platform is it's very flexible. There's lots of features you can tap into, building these programs or using content management system tools. So we kind of felt that a consistent experience out there to discover content is your Netflixes, your Primes, your Disney Pluses, where there's that sort of typical UI component of the carousel. So quite a simple interface for users to sort of sift through and discover activities. So yeah, kind of tapping into the content management system feature of the platform gave us the ability to, the guys did it all themselves actually with our instruction. Is the building that page, building up carousels, but allowed them to create the content into specific chunks. So they completely sort of dictate what appeared in those carousels for users. So yeah, moving on to Chris, who will now show how it all came together in the platform.
Thank you, Toby. So what we did was what we'd like to do a bit of a build up to launch, but use not only the comms on the intranet and the other 3 areas that actually use the system itself. So we set up a new page with some promotional graphics. So this was 3 weeks before our actual launch date. So even if people did miss all of those communications that we put across the business, next time they logged in to do some compliance training, they would see this kind of little graphics here that we got for Vault Growth and when it was coming on the 23rd of November. We were also even able to add a link on the home page. So there's a little link there, click here to learn more, and that actually direct people to our internal intranet where they could see the original comms and also access that FAQ document. Okay, so that was a really useful part of the kind of discovering what we could do with the homepage. So when we reached the actual launch, we switched to a brand new homepage or an updated homepage. And this is where employees could access the Vault Growth. So now it was launched, all they would have to do is click anywhere on the Vault Growth graphics there, anywhere across, and they would reach the page. And as I said earlier, this was really important to us that we separated our compliance training to our development training. So this was something that worked a lot with Toby to achieve. We didn't want anything to change where people access their current compliance training because that was really important to us. We wanted this to be a whole new section. So when people clicked on the Vault Growth graphics, they would then see this page here. So this was just Vault Growth material, completely separate. And as Toby mentioned, we use the carousel functions. So they could just click on the arrows and browse through the different modules that were there. So this was formatted in exactly the same way as the module brochure. So all the categories, the 16 categories were all the same. The only thing we added was a little bit more of a description just for the whole area or the section that you were looking at. For example, corporate governance there, you can see there's some writing below that. That was just a description of the whole group as a whole. So again, employees could access their training through the normal way, their compliance stuff, and this was completely separate. And with the carousel function, it just looks fantastic and people could just browse through. So back to our blended approach. So this was something Paul mentioned earlier on. So that was our idea. So this is how we made it work in practice. So again, people would book on to a course via our training brochure. So this would be a remote or classroom course. They would receive some joining instructions that would give them full details, as you would expect, about the event, but also a workbook. And in that workbook, it would advise them what pre-work they need to do before the session. So any policies that they needed to review, or indeed any growth modules. So there's a few with recruitment interviewing that we chose. 2 of those that you can just about see there on the screen are direct and indirect discrimination and unconscious bias. So we would expect that before people attended the session, they would have viewed those modules. So they would then bring that learning into the classroom itself, and we'd start to explore some of those areas. So for example, unconscious bias. There was a great story in unconscious bias that really brought it to life what it was all about. So what we did was we brought that question into the classroom, asked people how they felt when they tried to solve the problem in regards to unconscious bias, and then it just gave us the opportunity to get people's thoughts and feelings around unconscious bias. Similarly, with the indirect and direct discrimination module, we created some scenarios that linked specifically to recruitment and ways that people could be discriminated against, be it harassment, indirect or direct discrimination. We came up with these separate scenarios and then asked people to match them to the type of discrimination that they would have learnt about as part of that Vault Growth module. And again, it gave people the opportunity to discuss this and thoughts and feelings came out around those different discrimination types. And then, as Paul mentioned earlier, we would then have people confirm that learning their knowledge in Vault through a knowledge-based assessment and provide us with some feedback about the session. So I'll just hand back to Paul now, and he's going to let you know how it's gone so far and some of the benefits that we found through having the modules in the system.
Thanks, Chris. So you're probably sitting there saying, well, that's all good, but how's it gone? Well, you can see on the screen here, you know, to date, since the 23rd of November, this was only a couple of weeks ago, we'd had 8,284 courses completed just in the Vault growth side, which averages about 5 courses completed per employee. However, what's more interesting for us is some of the subjects of those courses that are being completed. We can clearly see that this is largely down to the self-directed learning and the choice people now have. Because as we've alluded to previously, some of those courses will have been completed because of the compliance-based training that some people have to do, particularly that are linked to some of the classroom or remote delivered courses that we've been doing. But we could clearly see from the reporting that's available to us that a lot of those courses had no direct correlation to what we'd been asking people to do, which clearly was a winner for us because it showed that people had bought into the principles and were engaged by doing this. Some of the feedback and some of the comments we've had, and you can see on the screen here, I'm not going to read them all, I'll let you read them. But one of the one that did really stand out for me is the second one in from the left, which says there are some really fun courses. The Kosh theme tune had me in stitches. Never thought I would be saying that for a course about Kosh. So for us, you know, it really brings home that the look and feel of this library that's now on offer offers a real modern feel and vibe to the learning element of what we're doing. And anyone who has any sort of compliance-based knowledge of Kosh will understand probably where that comment's coming from. So it did make us chuckle a little bit in terms of when we were reviewing some of the feedback and some of the comments. So just to summarize before we move on to Q&A, I guess, was what have we seen as the benefits to this, and what have we taken from this? It's only been a short journey so far. As I say, we launched it on the 23rd of November, and we launched it at a time again during the pandemic, which has really given, provided a platform for us to. We were always going to do it anyway, but obviously what it's given us is this bite-sized learning now for all our employees, regardless of where they sit in the hierarchy or what they have to do. And there's a wide range, as I say, over 130, short e-learning videos, PDFs that people can learn from, covering a wide range of subject matters. But more importantly, people are taking responsibility for their own learning now, rather than having to be directed. This is self-directed, and they're really buying into that. And we feel, as a result of that, we get greater engagement, and there's an opportunity for our people to learn in a real flexible way at a time that suits them, whether that's during downtime, whether that's during their shift changes, or because we have people who work at different shift patterns, or even from home, because this can be accessed on personal learning devices and things like that, or personal devices, should I say. Obviously, having now had this, we had the opportunity to link some of this learning to our internal modules that we were doing. And, more importantly for us, we started to look at other company initiatives that we have. We use a diversity calendar to really promote the various different things that happen in the calendar year from a diversity and equality perspective. And we were able to link some of those growth modules to that. What it did, it made our classroom training a lot more engaging as a result, and remote sessions that we've been delivering throughout the pandemic, and it made it a lot more practical to do that, and made it more engaging as a result of what people had learned prior to coming into that session. What we found was delegates came better prepared, because, as I say, this whole theory previously, we'd spend a lot of time in our classroom training talking about processes, talking about the theory side of things, and what we found was delegates turned up and they were much more prepared because they had the opportunity of that pre-learning. You could sense they were much more knowledgeable about that subject matter before they even turned up. And I think it's fair to say what we've done and how we shaped it in the beginning is starting to change. So in the beginning, we utilized the library and what was on offer to fit into our classroom training and other training that we could do, as well as giving people the opportunity to do all the other stuff that wasn't directly related. What we've found is we're starting to look at this content now and starting to turn it on its head, and we're starting to say, well, okay, taking the content, what can we build from that? So we're starting to utilize the platform content to drive future learning and seeing, well, what can we take and turn it on its head and drive the other way around now. So for us, it's been a real benefit to see how that's unfolded in the short time we've had it, and to see the impact it's had on our people and what we've found. So I think we go on to the next slide, Chris. I think I want to hand back to Bogdan in terms of Q&A.
Thanks very much, Paul. And thanks, Paul, Chris and Toby, for that really interesting presentation. We've got a bit of time to spend on Q&A now. So if you did have some questions, do please send them along. We've already had a few that have come through. So to start off with, we've got one: how do you engage with those working remotely who do not see development as a priority over operational work? And I'll put that to Chris.
So I think the main driver for us is the relationships that we have with our site managers and function heads, really. Quite open relationships with them. They are very much on board with everything we're trying to do within the learning development team. And I think that have been on board from the start. But Paul said we had lots of support from our senior management. So for when we started this journey, if you like. So I just think it's the constant and consistent communication with them, and I guess that's where our communication strategy came from. That it was about letting them know what we are doing, the benefits of that, and then the proof's kind of been in the pudding from the feedback, and we definitely share that with people so that they can see that this way of learning, if you like, is extremely engaging. I think particularly from those classroom courses, the feedback from them has been absolutely excellent based on the changes that we've made. Anything to add, Paul?
Yeah, I would say I think this sort of platform is becoming more the norm. I think in organisations, prior to us engaging with this from a general learning perspective, we have engaged some of our technology team or engaged our technology team about buying platforms and utilising platforms specifically in the IT or the technology space. And I think it's become much more the norm that people have this at their fingertips. So it was really refreshing for us to do this, because again, it's not very much just technology based. There's a wide range of subjects on there, and I think the figures of we shared earlier on of how many people have actually looked at this or actually not just looked at it but completed learning on it is testament. We had 8,284 people, or sorry, 8,284 courses completed. That's testimony for us that there's the engagement's there with it. But I totally understand where the question's coming from, because some people often see operations as coming first and foremost, and that is from a wide range of employees, both operations and support-based people who are working remotely from home at the minute, who are able to tap into this.
Thanks both. And the next question is, how do you facilitate a busy working environment where, despite being keen to focus on L&D, line managers find it difficult to allow employees to take time out of their working day to do this? And I'll put that to Paul.
Thanks, Bogdan. I think, again, that dilemma, it's probably similar to the last one. I think what we find is that there's an element of compliance in what we do. We're heavily regulated. We have, compliance challenges that people have to complete their annual refresher training on a regular basis, and so on and so on. And I think for those that, as much communication we've done around this subject and the whole growth library and modules, what people are still discovering is that, when they go in, they all of a sudden see this and then click onto it and see what's there. So sometimes that that compliance stuff does drive that realization that this other training is there for them. And I think what we're also doing is through our operational training, some of the management and operational training that we offer, which again, some of it is considered compliance if you're in a specific role. Well, what we're doing as part of that pre-learning is engaging with the library, and then that people are discovering more and more. And it is a challenge, most definitely, with managers, because managers will see we'll see first and foremost the operational side of the business coming first. But I think it's just chipping away at it. We keep on chipping away, and I think people are starting now to want more of this. So it's not. I think the last 18 months for a lot of people, certainly the last 15, 16 months for a lot of people, has seen a different side to this sort of thing. People have had a bit more downtime, whether that's because they've been furloughed or because they're on a different working pattern and whatever the case may be. So there has been a little bit more downtime where people have started exploring more and more and what's out there for them. And I think us giving them this opportunity really does help drive that. That debate around operational stuff. I don't know if you've got anything else to add to that, Chris.
Yeah, and as soon as people kind of see it, they can see the benefits of it. But we do lots of one-to-one coaching too, and we would recommend particular modules. If a line manager comes to us and say this person's struggling with this area, what can you do to help? We'll look at our courses. We'll look at the module brochure for Thrive as well, or growth, and we'll recommend. And do you see what I mean? So there's lots of different ways that we're starting to use this now. And once the line managers see that benefit from people attending or see them themselves, it's good to see them getting on board.
Cool, thank you. And the next question is the number of courses completed that you mentioned. How does that compare to what you had previously? Was there a baseline there that you can compare it to? And I'll put that to Chris.
I guess not, because this is the first kind of self-serve platform that we've had. So everything else was absolutely compliance driven. So you would get your training based on your role. And I think that's why we added that figure in there around this equates to 5 courses per employee to give some context to it. Paul, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't believe that and every employee's touched these modules, but I think, as Chris said, we had nothing to base it on. A lot of it was driven by role. So even though our training brochure, we did do developmental stuff in there, but and it was discussed, but a lot of it was driven by, if you're a manager, you need to do a course such as disciplinary and grievance, or you need to do health and safety for managers, or you need to do performance review training. A lot of that was very much driven by your role. This is brand new to us. We didn't have nothing to compare it to. So whilst some of the 8,000 plus modules that have been completed or learning activities have been completed, some of that will be driven by those that have attended classroom or remote sessions relative to some of the courses I mentioned then, because of the role specific. But we know that we haven't delivered that many training sessions in those subjects to warrant that. So a large proportion of that 8,000 plus modules are largely down to that self-driven mentality of people going onto the platform, exploring what's there and completing that learning.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, you mentioned that you worked with other teams. How was that exactly? How did it work? And I'll put that to Paul.
Yeah, I think we have a fantastic working relationship with our other teams. The main teams we worked with was outside of obviously Vaultex with Digits, was our internal communications and engagement team who provided us the support. We started, because a lot of the time you are almost looking for a slot in the calendar, particularly with our intranet communications. Things need to be up there for a certain amount of time, and we want to be recognising and get the optimum time when we could leave this intranet article up there, because it's like a rolling banner, and we wanted to make sure that that stayed up there for as much exposure and for a period of time to get as much exposure as we could. So the main people we worked with, other than the senior managers getting their buy-in and putting a proposal together of what this would do, the next steps was Chris and I working to develop the content. We got what we needed from Digital, and we had what we needed from Digital at that point in time. So a lot of the stuff that you've seen today has been internally developed by myself and Chris, but then utilising the expertise of the comms team. So it was mainly the comms team, really, and actually coming together with them and getting ideas of how we could promote this. That was important to us. But as I say, I mean, it's difficult to put a time frame on when that's first started. We launched it. We had a time when we wanted to launch it in the November period, trying to pick and utilise the best opportunity in terms of getting a slot for the intranet and the comms. But also, I would say it probably, from start to finish, and we could have sped this up, but it was probably about 2 months in the making, if you consider, because we weren't doing this full time. We were doing this off the back of, or as well as our day jobs at the time, to develop this content and get it right. So they're the main people we worked with in essence in the business.
Cool, thank you. And the next question is, what are the next steps in kind of progressing this forward? I know you briefly mentioned it at the end of your presentation, but just wondering if you wanted to add anything else to your future plans for the platform, Chris.
Yeah, I think it's, as Paul was saying, we're starting to develop new courses based off the content that is in Vault Growth at the moment. So some ones that we're looking at currently: a coaching and mentoring course. We've got a leadership course, because there's some great modules on that in there. So using that to kind of build on to create some new classroom and remote sessions, but also just looking at what content comes into the system and how we can get people using it more and promote that internally, really. Anything else you'd like to add, Paul?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be opportunities, because content's refreshed regularly, so new content will come in. As I understand how the platform works, the developers of the platform will develop content and launch it. But we're very mindful about what we do launch, because we want to see it first and we want to understand it. So we do get asked questions, we're aware of it, and we don't want to be in a position that something's being launched into the platform and then someone comes to the L&D team with a question and we haven't got a clue what's happened here and what it's about. So we're very aware of how that's managed and the integration of that, and then what it can do for us. But also, I think just also alluding to what Chris said as well, and how we're developing our thinking around it. It's much more about, as I say, continuing in that space and continuing to work with what we've got and to see, well, how can we drive traffic towards it? That's going to be the main thing. As I say, it's been in 7 months, 8 months now, and we've had success. It's making sure, I think, and the way we've done it by ensuring that there's a correlation between what we're doing with our brochure training, call it brochure training, but our standard training, having that correlation between it, it's not going to go away for us. For us, that's going to be part and parcel of our fixture and fittings going forward in terms of our offering. And as I say, people then will see the benefits of this, and then I think nature and the inquisitive nature of people will mean that they'll look for more opportunities. And I think the other thing that's key in this space is how it correlates into what we do, because the information that's in there is very generic. So that's very good to take into account, but you need to be mindful. Anyone utilizing the platform needs to have an understanding. So don't think you can just switch it on without actually doing some of this groundwork, without actually having a look at it and going, well, actually, what does that actually mean? And making sure it doesn't contradict anything that you're already saying, or how does it complement what you're doing? So if you've got policies and procedures around certain things, making sure how then you can then merge two together to make sure that people are taking the learnings from the platform and what they've got there, and then basically ensuring that it correlates internally with what your standard procedures or policy is saying within that particular space. So I think, it definitely has worked for us, and no two ways about it. But, I genuinely believe that that's because of the work and the commitment that's gone in through those that have been involved to get it to the place where we are now. And we believe that that has been repaid back in what we're seeing.
Thanks both, and thanks once again for the excellent presentation and the work that you've put into this. Really enjoyed working with you. Next slide, please, Chris. If you'd like to discover more about Digit's learning management system or the rest of Cyprus people management solutions, do get in touch by emailing getinTouch@digits.co.uk or opt in to find out more using the exit survey you see after this webinar ends. That survey will also ask you for a bit of feedback about today's broadcast, which will help us improve our webinars in the future. So do take a couple of minutes to fill it in if you can. Thanks again, and thanks for joining us today, and we hope to see you at another future Digits webinar.